Final segment this morning on MorningLine with John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association, talking about some of the gun laws, regulations, changes, things that are happening here in Tennessee. Thanks to have you on this morning. It's a pleasure, my friend. Let's go back to the phone lines. We've got Tony now. Tony, another Tony. Hi, Tony.
Yeah, good morning, Nick.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Harris. You know, I respect you, Mr. Harris, and I believe you helped me out of the incident, the organization. I got involved with an altercation with Metro Police. The police wanted to take my weapons out of the home and lock them up so you get them back later. But I knew that was false, and I appreciate it. Now, the question I've been trying to get Mr. Harris, somebody in this organization to answer, where is I know you all be able to say it on the air without researching. Can you take these weapons into a library, any public places like that for protection, while a lot of gathering people are? And Mr. Harris, you answer that.
You'll be glad to. And
I also want to know that why aren't you collaborating with the government to establish some kind of rules to help the public, you know, keep the confusion down. And if you would, I appreciate that, Mr. Harris, because I think you have a lot of sway, and I think you can do a lot in public favor, more than what you're doing. And I appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you.
On his last point, the simplifying the laws, he makes a great point. Tennessee law, don't even go to federal law yet, but Tennessee law on what a civilian can do in terms of owning a weapon, possessing a weapon, when they can use it and where they can carry it, is far too complicated.
Don't even try to mess with it. I have no,
And the reason is, sadly, is that over the last 3 decades, our legislature, not necessarily the people that are there now, but collectively, they have not really taken a step back and said, let's write a law that an 8th grader can understand and simply apply. What they've done is they've patchworked law after law after law, and now we've got what looks like this big, enormous mess that is inconsistent and irreconcilable. Now, as to his first question, and we're working on that, but we don't have the votes in the legislature to fix that yet.
Right.
On his first question of where can he go, under Tennessee law, you've got only a couple of places that are really off limits by statute. One is a courtroom, not a courthouse, but just the courtroom. One is school grounds, and that's changed a little bit now that the parking lots are somewhat available. And then there's this concept of the public parks, and that's a confusing area because the statute's poorly written.
You know about the library?
The library is not off limits by
I was
statute.
wondering, when he brought that up, I didn't know the answer.
Yeah,
okay.
So you've got a lot of other public buildings like county clerk's offices, election commissions, you know, TWRA facilities, TDOT. One issue that we had for a while was the rest stops on the interstate were posted.
That's right.
But any other public place other than schools, courtrooms, and some things like civic centers where there's a gray area, if they're off limits, they have to have a sign up, and they're posted because some bureaucrat decided to post it, and you don't get to vote on who the bureaucrats are. So you've got people that are not elected officials making the decisions on places like libraries. Now, it could be off limits, but if it is, it has to have a sign.
The sign posted. And again, you know, I don't think they ever changed at the federal level the rules prohibiting the weapons being carried in recruitment offices. And of course, remember, that was a big thing that came up after the horrible incident in Chattanooga. And remember, we had these armed, you know, guards outside some of the recruitment offices. That's, of course, died down since then. And I don't believe the officers in these recruitment offices can still bring weapons with them in a lot of these federal buildings.
That's a problem, and the reason is with respect to our National Guard members, and that's the only ones that are really in discussion. It depends on if their post is on a federally owned piece of property or a state-owned piece of property. So if it's state-owned, our governor decides, or the legislature. If it's federal, then the federal people decide. And after Chattanooga, our governor instructed the state National Guards general to develop a policy for National Guard members on state property possess firearms. And they developed a policy, but it is so convoluted and unreasonable that it's frankly an affront to the members of the armed services.
So just don't mess with it is what they're thinking.
Well, it requires that the guns be empty. So they can carry hammers, but they can't carry firearms.
And then they are trained to use their firearms. So it's an interesting debate on that. Let's go to Steve. Steve, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Steve, go ahead.
Okay, this is like two parts. It's about child endangerment. About a week or two ago, I saw on TV some mother had left his child, or her child, like 120 feet from where she was, inside a gated community, and somebody reported it, and the mother was charged with child endangerment. On the very same day, I saw it on the Nashville News, some child had shot himself with his parents' gun, found it in the bedroom on a shelf, and it was loaded, and the safety was on, and the child accidentally shot himself, but no child endangerment charges were filed against that parent. In my opinion, both parents should have been charged with child endangerment, the gun should have been confiscated, and they should never be allowed to own another gun because they are being very irresponsible towards their own children. That's my point.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm sorry. I agree with the sense of these horrible shootings. I mean, we've got some cases here locally that have happened. You know, a little girl that went in and grabbed a gun and shot another little girl outside here. I think it was in North Nashville, and this 11-year-old that's been shot. I mean, if you have a loaded gun in your house and you have children in there, you better have a plan. Is that a no-brainer?
That is a no-brainer.
I mean, come on.
You're responsible for making sure that the stuff that's in your house, the stuff that's under your control, particularly if you have minor children, small kids, is maintained and possessed safely. You know, we don't leave butcher knives laying out on the floor.
You don't leave rat poisoning laying around either.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
I mean,
and so we've had too many accidental shootings of children or anybody.
Yeah.
And in each instance, it appears, based upon the reports that I've seen, that was because the weapon was left in a condition or a location where it was easily accessible and maybe shouldn't have been. I mean, sometimes those things happen with trained police officers. See, they come home, they take their duty belt off, but the kid can get to the gun.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, and I think it raises a valid point, is should that result in child endangerment? You know, and I don't know enough of the facts to know if charges were brought or were ever brought, because you can have a situation like we saw with the Holly Bobo murders, that the arrest or the charges may not come for months.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because they have to investigate it, and then it's not necessarily newsworthy.
Right.
So it may have happened. It may still happen. I don't know.
Well, there's got to be a threshold for when it becomes child endangerment. I mean, to me, I think a parent in this situation, depending on the circumstances, should be charged with child endangerment. He gave a good example of why. Now, kids are clever, and you know, you can have it. Maybe they figure out what the combination is to the gun locker, or they figure out how to pull out the drawer and reach down below to get it. That's different. But if you're leaving loaded weapons out on the kitchen table or next to your nightstand in broad daylight with, you know, little 4- and 5-year-olds running around that like to play cowboys, that's child endangerment in my opinion.
You're asking for trouble.
I mean, you're just asking for trouble. Just be smarter than that. Let's go to Barbara. Hi, Barbara.
Hello.
Yeah, you had to follow up. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Okay. I have two things to say.
Okay.
First is in answer to the first Tony.
Okay.
They are ones of us that are scared of guns because we've had interactions with people that had guns and have had them pointed at us, have been threatened by them, legal gun owners with permits. That is why we are afraid of them. And some of us, in my case, I have too bad of a temper to even own a gun.
Yeah.
And I know it. There are other people that don't.
Now, yeah, listen, your point, we're right up against it. I want to let him comment on it. She makes an interesting point. I did a story just a few weeks back. Road rage is what comes to mind, and tempers. And I'm like her that way. There's sometimes I'm glad. Now, I would never shoot anyone, but I mean, I'm glad sometimes I don't have that temptation, you know, but I mean, road rage, I hear about it all the time. Someone pointing a gun at another vehicle that cut them off. They're not pulling the trigger. That happens in L.A. a lot. But yeah, that's why, you know, your personal experience, she fears that. These are legal owners. But, you know, crossing a line they probably shouldn't cross sometimes. Oh,
and there's no doubt that those types of things may occur. But if you look at the data, you know, we've had handgun permit holders in Tennessee now since May of 1994, 21 years. We've had people carrying guns legally long before that because they could do it with sheriff's commissions.
Okay.
And we've not got a history. There's not a data bank showing that there's been a huge problem with this. I think what you see are incidences that certainly have occurred in a small number of cases. And the question becomes, is it really the gun that's the problem, or do we have somebody that's got probably an anger issue or a mental illness issue that they're going to have regardless of the gun? They could just as easily have thrown a hand grenade or a brick or a rock or pulled a knife on her.
2 minutes just to wrap. We probably won't see you again until the new year, but legislation,
something could happen
in the works. Well, right, but in the new year and as we go, any specific thing you think folks should watch for that you are really going to be pushing with regard to guns for lawmakers?
Let me say, instead of pushing, supporting, because we have been in contact with legislators, including a couple of state senators, who are really the people that are pushing some bills that we like.
Okay.
One is constitutional carry, the other is the elimination of some gun-free zones, the other is to clarify things like the confusion over the parks bill. We're seeing, and this is interesting, legislators are really initiating, and they're coming to us and saying, we need your advice on how to better write this.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not pushing it in the term of taking it to them and saying, look, you need to either do this or we're going to come after you.
Yeah.
So I think our legislature is becoming more sensitive to the need to deal with these problems and to trust our citizens a little more.
We'll be following it. John, as always, pleasure, my friend. Have a great Christmas, happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year, all right?
Very good.
Take a break, be back. Programming note about tomorrow as we wrap things up after this. Stay with us, everyone.